Take it away, Tim.
Yeah, so this is our class on kind of a big overview of photos, how to take them, how to save them. And traditionally after this class, if anybody has a request for something more specific, we'll always accommodate that. And what I mean by that is if you want more information on, how saving files and pictures and that sort of thing works with different online tools, we can do a class specifically on that. If you want a class specifically on, how to take photos, we can do that. If you want a class on what should you buy, or things like what do they actually do, like what does a different lens do compared to this lens, or what's the difference between a monopod and a tripod kind of thing. We'll do that. We've also in the past done a class specifically on how to kind of get the most out of your Zoom meetings, seeing as those don't seem like they're going away anytime soon. We've done a class specifically on that. So yeah, any specific questions you have or you think you want a deeper dive into, be sure to let Mary know and we can set that up. As far as this class goes, we're going to be doing an overview on taking and sharing photos, on saving photos, that sort of thing. If you have any questions during, you can always write them in the chat. We will also stop, in between slide sections where we can go over answers. There is a lot of material to cover, so I may be going through a little bit faster than normal. So feel free to ask me to expand on a point, or at the end, there will always be time for me to specifically go back and click on one of the links, for example, that I have in this presentation. At the end of this, you will receive an email from Mary if you've signed up for the class and if she has your email address, with a link to the video, so the recording that we're doing here today, and you'll also gain access to the slideshow. The nice thing about the slideshow is anytime we do a class like this, which is about once a year, I will update the slides, which means that if you look at these slides in 3 years, you'll get all updated information that may be more relevant in 2025 versus 2022, which could be helpful because you can just check it in December of next year instead of going to another class, and you'll see updated things. All right, so we're going to get started. This is just a quick overview slide. It's not really that important, but it has some nice verbiage, so you can look at it later. So whenever you hear about photography or really anything in general, there are always rules. So, one of the rules is the 1/3 rule or the thirds rule. And as always, feel free to break as many as you want, but just learn a little bit about the rules before you decide to break them. Just have a better time. One of the wonderful things about photography in this day and age versus when I started is it's digital. So when I started, you had a roll of film and you took a photo, and you better have gotten that photo right, because you couldn't take 10 of the same photo without carrying around, 20 rolls of film all the time, which got very frustrating. The other nice thing about taking photos digitally is you don't really care about centering and composition, making it perfect there, because you can always go to your computer or use your smartphone and crop it. You can also edit it. You can do many, many things to it. So it's more important to take the photo than it is to properly set up the photo and then take it once. You can just say, okay, I don't know if this angle is better than this angle. Well, instead of trying to figure it out, just take both photos. If you're taking a portrait, or if you're taking a photo of multiple family members at a gathering, just take that photo 20 times and pick the best one. You don't really care to get the shot right the first time because you have 20 of them to go through. On the other hand, this can get kind of frustrating because at the end of the day, you'll have 2,000 photos to go through. But you can just keep taking photos, and as long as you are willing to look through them afterwards, it kind of makes it a lot easier than it was in the past. Kind of the base things to think about when you're taking a photo are the bullet points on the right, particularly for like portraits and stuff. You want to make sure that the lighting is good. This means that if you're taking a photo inside, you want to make sure that the person's face is towards the light so that the face is illuminated instead of really dark. And I can show you an example of that later. However, as always, you can feel free to break this to make a dynamic image. Try different angles. We have more examples of this later, but basically, if you're taking a photograph of someone, if you take a photo of them from below them, oftentimes you'll get a double chin. If you take the photo from above them, sometimes you get a really, really big forehead. If you take the photo straight on, sometimes it's flat. So just take the photo in different angles and see which one works best for the image you're trying to convey. Again, with people, try, instead of zooming in on the camera, try and physically go closer. Oftentimes when you're zooming in on a camera, it's actually just cropping the final image, which again, you can always do later. So physically move the camera closer and then take the photo instead of using the telephoto. And this is especially true on things like phone cameras. If people aren't laughing, and if you're a funny person, feel free to make a joke. Oftentimes that's a far more natural smile than the all teeth smile I give whenever someone says smile. Just making a joke kind of makes it more relaxed. And always, if you're doing like an event, bring props. It allows people to kind of get into it a little bit more. If you're taking a photo outside, I assume some of you may not have heard of the golden hour. This is kind of around sunset, just before and after sunrise. This is when the light is nice and soft, so you don't get those harsh shadows on someone's face or on a tree or on a landscape or on whatever you're trying to take a photo of. And the golden hour, you can always use the goldenhour.com. It will tell you based on what part of the world you're in, what the golden hour is for you. So, if you're taking a hike, photos that you take early morning or in the evening might turn out better than ones you take at noon, just because of that really harsh light. There's always the rule of thirds, which is basically oftentimes it's better to have the focal point of the image or the thing you want people to look at. If you divide the screen into thirds, horizontally and vertically, it's better to be in one of those corners. Also for like landscapes, if there's a mountain range, you want the mountain range, the bottom of it, to start at the bottom third and go up to the top third. And we'll have examples of that later as well. The other thing when taking photos is your hands are never as still as you think they are. So when possible, please use something like a tripod or rest your camera against something in order to stabilize it as much as possible. Oftentimes, whenever you're taking a photo and you're looking at it on a phone or you're looking at it on the viewfinder of a camera, you can't notice how out of focus something is. And this is oftentimes because you're not using a tripod, because the camera shakes a little bit and the lines just aren't perfectly crisp and clear. So try and stabilize the camera however you can. Here's just a quick example of lighting. This is more for looking back on it later, but the really nice thing about this is it shows what the person looks like in the top, and it shows the lighting setup below it. So it kind of shows you what a direct light looks like versus an indirect light. and the indirect light is done using that white piece of paper, which kind of acts as a shade on the bottom. Here's a little quick thing on angles. And also the nice thing is right below it, it gives kind of an evocative statement on what this might represent. So for example, the lying down, which is on the right-hand side, which means you're shooting upward. It kind of makes the person a little more powerful just because of the angle. So it's kind of fun if you look on LinkedIn or if you look on a business page website that has photos of the people who are in the business. Oftentimes you'll see, CEOs or vice presidents, that kind of thing. They'll often be shot a little bit lower just to give that impression of them being a little bit more powerful. Next, we're going to go on to equipment a little bit. I realize money doesn't grow on trees, but especially if you want to do photography for like a store, if you sell things, it's important to have some of these things like a light box just to make the products seem a little bit more professionally done and eye-catching. Some of those items would be a light box, a light diffuser. The light diffuser is similar to what you saw in the first example, which is this. It can be very simple, just like this, with a white piece of paper next to a bulb that will diffuse the light and make it less harsh. The next thing is a bag. Especially if you buy a high-end camera, you kind of want to protect it. And we'll go over the costs of these things later, particularly the high-end cameras. So just buy a bag. You can buy them for about $20 all the way up to way too much money, like $400 or $500. But basically, you're just looking for something padded that the camera doesn't bounce around in. The next thing is a flash. If you're taking photos of anything that's fast moving, or if you just want to take photos in not ideal lighting situations, a flash is very useful. This is something that will attach to your camera and will generally automatically go off whenever you take a photo. Next on here, I have memory cards. Memory cards are very important for large cameras that require them. Photos these days take up a lot of space, and it's very frustrating if you're taking photos, if you're on vacation, for example, and you took photos on Monday and Tuesday, and then you go to take photos on Wednesday and you're out of space. Because then you have to sit there, you have to go through the tiny little viewing screen and delete photos. So you can either avoid this by, taking your photos off at the end of every day, or you can just buy an additional, $50 memory card. The benefit with having an additional memory card is if one of them dies, then you'll have an extra one. The last thing I have on here is lens filters. There are way too many to mention. So I have a link there to kind of a cheat sheet of what the different lens filters do. One of the best things that lens filters do, though, in my opinion, is they protect the lens. These lenses are, for the higher quality ones, they start at about $1,000. So a $10 lens filter seems like an incredible investment so that you don't get stuff that accidentally hits that glass on the front of your lens. And again, with any of these things, you can always ask, and we can go over them at the end. This is just a photo that's an example of what a light box is. Basically, a light box is something that makes a very even amount of light. This is generally for product photography. It'll make a very even amount of light that's not harsh, just so it's very clear and very easy to see what the product is. They can also be very cheap. Camera. So if you're taking photos, you need a camera. If you already have a camera, perfect. If you want to upgrade your camera, be ready to spend money. If you don't want to upgrade your camera, that's perfectly fine. Beautiful, fantastic pictures have been taken over the years. It's not like a photo taken in 2007. If it was beautiful then, it doesn't mean it's not beautiful now because it wasn't made on a newer camera. So it's definitely how you use it, not what equipment you have. However, the newer equipment is more powerful and more forgiving. There are a couple different types, and by a couple, I mean way too many to count. So we have limited it to these four. We have a DSLR. These are the big cameras. We have compact cameras, which are basically cameras that pretend to be a DSLR but aren't as expensive. We have pocket cameras, which are the ones generally with the retractable lenses that can fit in your pocket or a bag very easily. And then now we have your phones, your cell phones, which I don't know about a lot of you, but the picture quality is one of the main reasons I would choose one phone over another phone these days. This is just an example of the difference between buying the different types of cameras. So every camera has what's called a frame size, which is how big the image is. And this is just a quick way, that's not 100% accurate, but it's a quick way of visualizing what the frame difference means. So you can see full frame is the red square. We have APS-C, which is the blue square. We have micro four thirds. That's generally the lower end of cameras in the yellow square. And then we have the iPhone/smartphone, which is in the green square. So it can kind of show you the vast differences you'll get when you're taking these sort of photos. This is less accurate these days because all these phones have wide angle lenses, which try and fix this issue. But you physically can't fit, that large of a sensor or that large of a frame size on a smartphone, which makes sense. It's just physically a smaller device. So it will always have the limitation of not being able to take as good photographs as a full frame sensor. So this kind of just goes over what I just said, but mainly full frames will have better field of view, and it will also allow you to capture more information because the pixels are less dense, which means, in quotes, you'll get better pixels. In reality, what this means is under different lighting conditions, you don't have to worry about things as much because it just allows more light into the sensor, so you'll get better images, but you'll pay for it. So prices, full frame. The example here is the Sony Alpha 7 IV or 7 IV, and that starts around $2,500. Please note, this does not come with a lens. So you're just talking about the body here, $2,500 for a camera. The next class is the APS-C, which are, kind of the more reasonably priced ones. And those are $1,500 to $1,700. The example is the Fujifilm. One of the benefits additionally of the smaller sensor size is that the lenses themselves are also cheaper. Oftentimes people will ask, what is the best camera brand you can buy? And the answer to that is whatever lenses you already have. The only time to really think about that question is when you're initially buying stuff and you have absolutely nothing. In general, though, I would say stick with the big ones. So, stick with Sony, stick with Canon, stick with Nikon, and then if you want to do something else, you can go with the Fujifilm, you can go with the, lots of other brands, but I'd say stick with the big ones, primarily because it's easier to get lenses for them. And the lenses are often a little bit cheaper just because the cameras are more commonly bought and used, so that more manufacturers make lenses for the cameras, driving the price down a little bit. And the last one on this list is, I just called it smaller. It's Canon PowerShot. And these are generally from $500 to $1,000 for a good one. And these have the lens, or the lens built in. So the nice thing about that is you already have the lens in the price. The bad thing is you can't switch out the lens for something else if you're going for a different look. And again, lenses vary incredibly in price. These are just kind of generic lenses that are, if you want to buy one lens for these cameras, these would be good options. The first one, I just realized I didn't put the model on it. The models are generally pretty weirdly titled, but the first one for the full frame is 1,400. The slightly smaller sensor one for the APS-C is 1,200, and the smaller one, you obviously can't change the lens on that. But this is just to give you like a quick idea of how much money these things cost. And because of how much they cost, phones start to look a little bit more attractive. So realize you're not going to be getting better picture quality, but as I like to say, the absolute best phone or the best camera you have is the one that's on you, the one that you have with you. So for example, if you're carrying around these full frame bad boys for $2,500 plus $1,400 of lens, you're talking about $4,000 you're carrying around, which one, I don't like carrying stuff like that around often, and two, it's big. You don't casually bring this with you all the time. You have to kind of plan for it, whereas you always will have your phone with you. This is why, in my opinion, and one of the reasons why whenever I go to buy a cell phone, I primarily choose my cell phone based on the camera that it has. I'm willing to, for example, I'm willing to buy the iPhone Pro versus the normal iPhone just because the camera is better on it. That additional $200 for the better camera makes sense to me. So right now there would be two phones that I've used and that I would recommend if you care about camera on your phone. The first one is the iPhone, obviously, the 14 Pro, starts at $1,000, and it has probably the best camera in a phone right now. The other choice I would have is the Google Pixel 6 Pro. However, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that right now because the 7 is coming out in October, and it will probably be around the same price. So that's $725. So again, the iPhone will take, the sensor is better. It will take a better photo. The Google Pixel line, however, what it has is it has a lot of good AI for the camera, which means that while the sensor, in my opinion, doesn't create as good of an image, the AI makes up that difference by making sure that the lighting is correct, or it makes sure that the skin tones are natural. It makes sure that green on the tree looks good. It kind of does all those enhancements automatically, so you don't have to think about it. This is kind of to quickly look back on. So these are just some settings for taking a portrait. And again, this will vary wildly depending on your lighting conditions and kind of the feel you want to get from the photo. But aperture mode, you generally want it to be wide, so that's a lower number. So that's f2.8 or f up to f2 or 5.6, and this will create a shallow depth of field. What that does is it makes the background kind of blurry, and whenever you're doing portrait of somebody, you don't really want someone focusing on what's behind them, right? You want them focusing on the person's face. So you want that shallow depth of field. In addition, you want generally a fast shutter speed. So we're looking at around 250. This isn't incredibly fast, but it's also not slow either. This just kind of stops any blurriness from the person accidentally moving a little bit. But as we kind of said in the first section, try different settings and just take more than one picture and then pick the one that you like the best. Similarly, here is a slide for macro settings. So these are for things that are small, like a bug. And you can go through and look at these afterwards. These are macro settings for my favorite thing to take photos of, which are flowers and things of that size. And I also like these settings because it doesn't require a flash. Whereas if you're taking photos of really, really small things, you often want a flash. And landscapes are incredibly whatever the heck you want. Go absolutely crazy. The only thing here is make sure you're using a tripod. But other than that, you can do amazing things just by playing around with the different settings. Also with landscape, the tripod will let you do very long exposures, which can oftentimes be really cool if you're photographing something like a river or a road. You kind of will just see the headlights of cars, or you'll see like this blue kind of effervescent wave. If you're doing water, you'll catch the motion of it running, which I think is kind of cool. And again, we have some photos of that afterwards that we can look at. Are there any questions so far before I get into like various tutorial websites?
Any questions? Not in the classroom. Anybody online? All right, Tim, keep going.
Perfect. All right, so we are going to I'll quickly just click on some of these just to show you why I have them listed. This one is from Geoff Lawrence, and he just has an absolute ton of photography tutorials that are wonderfully specialized. So, for example, if you want a tutorial on composition, you would click on the link in the slides and click on the composition. If you want to know what depth of field is, so how to create that blurring effect behind you or behind the subject, you would click on depth of field. Exposure, lighting, color, working with different subjects, photo editing. He really has everything on this website. And that's why I linked to it, just because it has everything you could possibly want. The next one I have is also, it will show up later in the how to save, how to back up and save your photos, and that's 500 pics. So I unapologetically love this website. I remember when it first came out, and I absolutely loved it because of what they were doing. One, what will happen is actual legitimate professional photographers use this website, and sometimes they will create guides on how to get a specific look on one of their photos, or how they in general approach different types of scenarios. So for example, I'm just going to click on portrait lighting tips. This is by Feature Shoot and was 1 year ago. And it will have lots of photos. It will have a lot of text. It will kind of go over different things on this specific thing, which is portrait lighting tips. And you can kind of just scroll through and see the different things that this is going to teach you how to do. I find these guides guides very nice because they often are accompanied by very, very nice photos, whereas sometimes in the other tutorials listed, the photos aren't kind of beautiful. It's just kind of very rough and showing you the difference. The other thing I like about the 500 Pix website is if we go to Discover, there may be some not safe for work imaging. 500 Pix is a very open website. But the thing I like about it is if you're thinking to yourself, wow, I really like that photo, and I'm about to go to a bridge that I want to take a photo of, what sort of settings should I use? You can go to 500 Pix. You can either search, so you could search for something like bridge, but I have one right here. I have this bridge image. I think it looks kind of cool and striking, so I'll click on it. Now, what's really cool is this one doesn't have it. No, I lied. One sec. What's really cool, I swear, is, let's just click on a different photo. This one. What's really cool, and apparently not all of them, but in general, most of them will have this. 2 hummingbirds or 2 kingfishers looks really cool. If you scroll down, it will show you the camera that they used. It shows you the lens that they used, and it shows you the settings that they used to capture the image. So I think this is really cool because you can essentially say, I want to take photos like this. What do I need, or what are the settings to take photos like this? And then you can see exactly what they did. So it's kind of like a straightforward, this is what they did, this is kind of how they did it. I can also do this. And definitely I recommend playing around and kind of just finding things you like. And then, you know, this looks kind of cool and ominous. I want this look. They used the Nikon D810. They used this lens, and these were the settings they used. So I think that's really cool. The other nice thing about 500 Pix, and we can kind of go over this later, but if you want pictures for a website or your business or something like that, oftentimes you can license these photos. And on the flip side, what's kind of cool is if you take photos and you put them on 500 Pix, it makes it easy for people to contact you and ask for, you know, your pricing to use your photo. Will that happen often? No, but it's kind of cool that the possibility exists. This next one is a YouTube video. In past classes, which were shorter, I would actually play portions of it, but this is by far my absolute favorite video on how to take a picture of someone. He's very informative, he's funny, and he shows you kind of how to move your head, or how to move the subject's head in order to put them in the best light. If you just want a quick 1 sentence, how do you take better portrait photographs? Actually 2 sentences. 1, use a tripod. That's kind of a baseline. And 2, have the subject point their forehead towards the camera. What that does is it will elongate the neck and give them a better jawline, which generally makes people look better. It may feel weird for the person who's having their picture taken, but it will look natural as long as you don't go crazy with it. Pictures of objects. Honestly, the best tutorial I found on this is from Shopify. And yes, they're trying to sell you stuff. They want you to put your merchandise on Shopify, but that doesn't negate that it's a good guide on how to take photos of products if you have, you know, an Etsy or Facebook marketplace presence. here, and we can definitely go over these if we have time / if people want at the end. These are some examples of what not to do. So, these are good and bad on how to take photos of people, how to take photos of places, that kind of thing. And it's oftentimes, I find it nice to see a bad photo because I learn as much from that as I would from a good photo, because I get to see, I get to say to myself, oh, I've done that. This is an explanation of why it's bad. So these are also fun links to sit down and peruse at your leisure. All right, so the next thing, or actually before we talk about editing products, does anyone have any questions on like how to find tutorials or anything like that?
You've given us an awful lot to play with. Thank you. Anybody online have any questions? You can either speak up or put it in the chat.
And again, I do realize this is almost aggressively dense for the time slot, but again, that's because this is, an overview on essentially what would be 3 different classes. Or if you look at it a different way, people, have 4-year degrees in how to take photos. So this isn't going to replace something like that. All right, so photo editing. This is a slide that is made up of free photo editing products. So basically, you would use these if you took a photo and you think, hey, this looks great, but I wish it were a little brighter, or I wish that green was a little bit more contrasty, or what, that person's face, it just has, it has a little, redness in the scalp that I want to fix. And the free versions will do that. Different free products are better at different things. They also have different types of learning curves. For example, GIMP.org. This is essentially the original Photoshop alternative. It is massive. It will do anything you possibly want. It is also so difficult to learn that since I already had access to Photoshop, I immediately gave up. So take that as you will. But essentially, if you don't want to pay for Photoshop, GIMP is a very good alternative. Some of these are also, they allow you to do the edits online versus instead of downloading something. For example, Pixlr. This will allow you to do some of these edits online. So if you have something like a Chromebook or an older computer, you don't need to worry about it because this will do it all not using your computer's power. What is good at taking away red eyes? Pretty much anything is, anything these days will have a red eye tool. We'll also have a link to, or one of these other pages is, spoiler alert, the next slide is, I believe it's phone applications, and all of those will have a red eye tool. All of these have a red eye tool. So red eyes are a fairly common problem, so everyone tries to solve it. The other thing to look at on this page is Adobe Express. This is Adobe's kind of watered down version of Photoshop. So if you want to kind of stick with one of the main competitors, Adobe Express would be a good option. The other thing that I like to say is sometimes it's useful to stick with the mainstream options. And that's because since it's a mainstream option, there are more tutorials and how-tos on how to use it. And that's kind of what Adobe has leveraged. Just because since everyone knows, Adobe's the big boy, everyone makes tutorials for Adobe, which means more people use Adobe, which means more tutorials are made for Adobe, which means more people use, so it, the cycle continues. So sometimes it's not worth fighting and you just stick with the big one. So which one can you buy outright rather than paying a month fee? In this list, in this section, all of these are free. Adobe, you can use their Express version for free. But if you're talking about editing on a computer, Adobe Everything Else is that cloud subscription service. I just want to do a quick shout out to Canva. It does have a free version. It does have a paid version. Mary, does the library still use Canva?
Yes, we do. We love it.
All right, that's an endorsement. So Canva is probably the best option if you have a business or a website and you want to quickly be able to post images, mark them up, put your branding on them. If you want to do stuff like that for an online presence for a store, Canva is hands down what you should be looking at. In general, I don't give recommendations like that, but I've just found over the years that Canva is just very easy to use, very streamlined, and very good for that purpose. Again, you can try it out for free. You can basically do anything you want free, but if you pay for the pro license, it just makes it a little bit easier and you get a little bit more features. But use it for free, and then once you find that you can't live without it, you can go to the pro version if you find it's making you money and worth the investment. All right, phone editing. Yes, it's a thing. So if you primarily post to or do things for Instagram or Facebook, Snapchat, whatever TikTok is these days, these are pretty good. I don't use them that often. I have used Snapseed, I have used Photoshop Express, and I have used Afterlight, and all of those are good. You can definitely play around in the phone editing space. Things change very quickly. And by things change very quickly, I mean people or a company will put out an application that allows you to edit things on your phone for free. It will be absolutely fantastic. Then all of a sudden, once they have a very large user base, they will cut features, make you pay for them, and then it's no longer free. So one of the nice things is Snapseed. It was made by Google. It's very full featured. It's slightly harder to learn than the other ones, but it's never going to cost money. Photoshop Express, never going to cost money. But Photoshop, they want you to buy their more full featured product. But if all you want is to, edit the red eye out or change the background a little, or like make someone's face a little bit brighter, take away some, red skin or pimples or something like that, all of these will be pretty good for that. Yep, and we're going to be talking about in the next slide, paid products. All right, so if you've noticed, there's only one product on here that has a subscription cost, and that's because I absolutely hate that practice. It makes me very unhappy, so I generally don't recommend it. The reason why I don't recommend it is if you have a paid subscription to something, they are allowed to change that whenever they want. It doesn't mean that they're going to, but what's to stop Adobe from charging more? Actually, I need to update this. I believe it's now $19 a month. For example, last year it was $10 a month. Now it's $20 a month because you have to get it with Lightroom. So they can, remove features they can try and take features away and give it to a different program that they sell, which now means you have to buy two things that are subscription based. So I just don't like it. The reason why Adobe is still on this, even though I don't like that practice, is Adobe, once again, is the absolute big boy in this space. Everything works with Adobe. Once you get into higher end cameras, or if you've already gotten into higher end cameras, you know this pain, but Adobe has plugins for every camera ever made. So you take a photo, you put it in Adobe, and it looks right. Some of these other editing applications, sometimes you'll take a camera that's a little bit lesser known, like a Fuji. You'll put the image into it, and it won't process it correctly, so the colors will look a little bit weird. You don't have to worry about that with the Adobe. If you look up a tutorial on how to do something, it's in Adobe. So that's why, Adobe, while I don't like subscription, sometimes it is worth it. The next one, and for example, and for the record, I have used absolutely all of these. So Portrait Professional. This one is specifically for portraits. That's right, the name does not lie. The thing that's really nice about this is basically, I don't do it anymore, but I used to do headshots for people, like being paid for it. Now I do them, but I don't get paid because I'm stupid. So basically, if I were editing someone's headshots, if I really wanted to make it pop, and I wanted to, fix their hair or make sure that, the mascara or the eyeliner was absolutely perfect, it would take me about an hour, right? Start to finish, edit a photo, before, after, takes an hour, just an example. With Portrait Pro, it would do 90% of that in like 5 minutes. So it would save me a lot of time. The other thing that's nice about it is you can kind of save these presets. So, for example, if someone suffers from a skin condition, for example, and always has, a red issue with their scalp, you can basically say, okay, whenever I take Tim's photo, I just apply the Tim filter, and all of a sudden his skin looks great. So you can kind of do that. The other nice thing about Portrait Pro is it will allow you to kind of make people look a little bit more lively. So I don't really like altering the face as much as you can see here, but you can see how the skin looks better, skin looks a little bit worse, better, worse. I know this is kind of a small image for some of you, but you can kind of go on this and click around, and you can kind of see all these sliders and see what they changed. You can also make people look very plastic if you want, but you can always tone it down and not do that. But there's a lot of options for that program. It is a $55 one-time fee. If you buy it around Black Friday, it's generally like 25 bucks. You buy it once and you have it forever. Good. The next option is the Nik collection. This is personally my absolute favorite. It's because I've been using it for many years, and I started using it as soon as Adobe went to a monthly price or a monthly subscription cost. And then I kind of never looked back. It's a little bit different in terms of how you use it for editing things than things like Adobe. But, it has a couple different products in it. So, one's really good for landscape, one's really good for people, one's really good for XYZ. So it kind of makes sense in that way. There is also, on the Nik collection, there's also a very robust community on tutorials, which I also appreciate. But again, if you want more information on like any of these, we can do a class on any specific one you want. I just generally don't like pushing a class on something that people would have to pay for. it just kind of, for me, kind of goes against the ethos of what a library stands for. But these are, good products. Affinity is for people who like Adobe or like Photoshop. They want to use Photoshop, but they don't want to pay for Photoshop monthly. So Affinity is you could call it a Photoshop clone. It has some things it does better. It has some things it does worse. It works with a lot of Photoshop plugins, if you know what those are. But you buy it once and it's yours. Right now, it's $55. Again, they'll often have sales. I think the last time I bought it for somebody, it was $20. You buy it once, you have it for life. Great. Skylum. This is an interesting photo editing tool because it's primarily AI based. And I know that term gets thrown around a lot, but it's honestly pretty good. And if you don't want to learn how to edit photos, and I don't mean that in like a negative way, people don't have enough time to learn everything in life. I have no idea how to do plumbing. So if you don't really want to get into the nitty gritty of how to use a Photoshop or an alternative to Photoshop, Luminar is pretty good with their auto products. So for example, if there is like a power line in your photo, you click on the power line and it goes away. If someone has red eyes, you click on it, it goes away. Someone has a skin blemish, you click on it, it goes away. You can change people's, hair. You can make it less frizzy. You can do a lot of things. And it's not just for photos or portraits. It's also for things like landscapes and animals and things like that. The last one is Topaz Labs. This is kind of way on the hardcore AI side. You basically put your photo into it and it will, remove film grain from it. It will remove artifacting from it. So you just kind of put it in and hope it works. But it's very useful for what it does. All right. So that's different editing software that we went over. Again, I know this class technically is 1 hour. I always book an hour and a half. So if anyone wants to stay after and ask questions, that's fine. I assume Mary is okay with it. I never check.
Yes.
And we're going to quickly go over storage. So storage. You can always store these things. Any of the editing tools have fun filters? Yes, absolutely. Every single editing tool on the computer will have fun filters. And oftentimes the filters or the editing programs on your phone, primarily what they do is things like filters. Adobe will obviously have the most filters because you can download extra filters and just add them in. So yep, all the filters in the world. Also, all the desktop editing applications, you can create your own filters and save them if there's a particular look you're going for, which is kind of cool. When Game of Thrones came out initially, they had the character portraits of everyone, and it was very obviously a filter. So I copied that for my Facebook profile, and people were suitably impressed. I got like 10 likes, so it was kind of a big deal. So for photo storage, lots of options. You can always buy an external hard drive. If you are looking to edit photos constantly, obviously you will want the photos that you're editing on your computer. It just makes the process faster. So an external hard drive is great for that. If you just Google SSD external hard drive, you'll find very many options. I just go with whatever is on sale or highest rated on Amazon. They all kind of use the same things at this point. So for online storage, which is better because if your computer crashes, you still have your photos. So essentially, if you're like me, you still have your memories. So I always recommend online. So Flickr, it's a really big boy in this space. However, it used to be a lot better for free. Now, if you want to use Flickr for free, you can have 1,000 photographs at one time. That's kind of annoying, but 1,000 photographs is still fairly big. It is $8.25 a month for unlimited photos, and you get additional things on top of that. Flickr is also a website that allows you to kind of sell your photos. So it will give you analytics on who is viewing your photos, what demographic, how many people, click on your photo and then want to buy it or try and download it, that sort of thing, which can be nice if, photography is more than just a hobby for you. The next one is 500 pixels. Again, I am unabashedly a fanboy of 500 pixels, mainly because their tutorials are so good. However, you can use it for free. You get a very weird limitation of 7 photos uploaded a week and 2,000 photos total. They partially do this so that since it's a platform that people can go to buy photos, they don't want it just, engulfed with tons and tons of, quote unquote, lower quality photos kind of thing. But you can upload 7 a week for 2,000 total. And you can also get unlimited photo backup and a bunch of other tools for $3.99 a month, which is honestly a pretty decent price these days. We have a question. What happens with photos if you decide to end a subscription for storage? Absolutely fantastic question. The answer will depend very much on what service you use. In general, they will give you 1 to 3 months to download the photos. You'll be able to download them in like one big pack. But I haven't heard of a photo sharing service, you forget to pay them or you cancel it and just all of your photos are gone poof. They'll generally try and annoy you a lot to pay to get the service back. And they will also annoy you to download the photos because honestly, they don't want that review. They don't want someone to say, hey, I missed paying. And the next week, my entire, 20 years worth of photos were deleted. So they give you 1 to 3 months to download your photos. Yep, 500 pixels, unlimited photo storage for $3.99 a month. SmugMug, I put this in here because it's still kind of a brand name. SmugMug is well known for basically being a photo site where you can upload your images and then you can get them printed into calendars. You can get them printed into tablecloths. You can get like put them in a photo frame and get those shipped. You can make mugs. So it's kind of nice for a family. It's also kind of nice for a business where you can get personalized swag pretty easily. It's $13 a month or $110 a year, and you get unlimited everything. So if you're going to use it for printing things, it's not that bad. If you're just using it for storage, I would use something else. Google Photos, it's still good. It used to be free for photos, an unlimited amount, but you get a decent amount of space for free. You get enough for like 150,000 photos, 200,000 photos, something around there for free, which for most people is very reasonable. So if you have a Google account, so if you have a Gmail address, Google Photos is very nice. The other nice thing with Google Photos is if you're taking photos on your smartphone, whether it be Apple or Android, you can set Google Photos up to automatically take those photos so that you don't need to have them take up space on your phone. The next thing is Amazon Prime. So for anyone here who already is paying for Amazon Prime, because it's a streaming service, it gets you faster shipping, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, what, $117 a year or something? Mm-hmm. You get Amazon Prime Photos for free. Amazon Prime Photos is an absolutely unlimited amount of storage for your photos. The cool thing about this is, once again, you can install the app on your phone and have your phone automatically back up all of its photos to Amazon Photos. You can also share your photos, just like with Google Photos. You can share them with someone else. So you can have multiple family members uploading all of their photos to the same location, which can be useful. But the main draw of Amazon Photos is that it's free-ish if you're already using it. All right, I'm only 5 minutes over so far. Let's go. One more slide.
Tim, did you see the question about video in the chat?
Oh, yeah. So that's a great question. How do they count video storage? Amazon Prime Photos, it counts videos as something else. So for free, if you have Amazon Prime, I believe you either get 5 or 10 gigs of storage that isn't photos, which you honestly fill up amazingly quickly with videos. So with videos, you would want to do something where you pay money for a large amount of storage. We do have a class specifically on cloud storage, which we kind of go over the prices more, but it's generally, you'll be paying generally under $10 a month for more storage than you need. But videos are also very large, so it depends. Final thoughts. So this is kind of the slide that I realized, since I've been absolutely blasting you with information, I've been talking for what seems to be far too long, and my throat's on fire. I have 3 final thoughts. The first one is, you're using a digital camera, probably. So shoot multiple pictures from multiple angles and pick out your photos later. It's always easier to see your photos on a larger screen, like a computer. So whenever you go back to your house, to your computer, hotel room, whatever, and look at the photos on a computer, it's very easy to tell which photo is good and which isn't. The next thing kind of keeps you in check. So if you're editing a photo, keep looking at the original image to make sure you're not going into that uncanny valley sort of territory where everything looks fake. Because as you edit a photo, you get used to that being what it looks like, and then it can lead you to taking things a little too far. So you can get into that kind of, I'm sure you've seen them online, like the Instagram posts where you're like, this person looks absolutely ridiculously fake. You can get there pretty quickly when you're editing a photo. And the last one, and probably the most important one, the best camera is the one that's with you. The best camera is the one that you're carrying all the time. In my case, that's my cell phone, and that's why I'm willing to pay a little bit more money for a better camera on my cell phone. But again, I've put in here kind of the higher end DSLRs or mirrorless full frame cameras. Just understand that if you want a really, really good camera, you're talking of multiple thousands of dollars. So that's another reason why I like phones. All right. I definitely have been talking at you for a very long time. Definitely feel free to drop off. As always, we will send all of this stuff to you. Any questions you have that you think of afterward, or if you want a tutorial on how to do something specific, or if you want a class on how to do something, just let Mary know. And if it's a tutorial, I'll find it and Mary can send it to you. Or if it's a good question, I'll add it to the slides so everyone can access it. But if anyone has any questions, I'll definitely answer them. So one of the questions we have is, have you thought of doing a program on photo books? So I assume this question is kind of like I don't want to say wedding album, but it's essentially like an album of photos. And yeah, we could definitely do a program on photo books. Honestly, the last photo books and the last couple of photo books I've made and bought have been using Google Photos. But things like Flickr or SmugMug also have that kind of functionality where you can, Apple also has a really good one, where you can kind of drag and drop photos onto different places of the book. You know, you can choose the different quality of paper. You can choose soft cover or hard cover. And the best part is you can show it to people and say, hey, my book was published, and they don't really know what you mean. Shutterfly is another one that's really good. I've never used Blurb, but I'll definitely look it out, check it out.
That's great. Tim, there must be tripods for cameras, right? I mean, for phone cameras.
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
So generally, whenever I'm buying a tripod,
Mhm.
I just buy a tripod. So basically, a tripod will, if it works for a phone, you'll see it will have, if you can see this in the image, there's like a little white thing that's gripping the phone. That portion will just screw on to a normal tripod. So basically what you're looking to get is you can already have a tripod and you just need that phone adapter.
Okay.
This is an all-in-one for 20 bucks. Probably not the best quality, but it's 20 bucks and better quality than you holding it, you know.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
I really like, let's see if I find it in like 5 seconds. I don't see the one I have, but I really like the ones that are kind of like this. If you look on the right hand or in the middle of this image, you can see that you can rotate it either way. So you can get the horizontal or you can get the vertical pictures from your phone, which I find useful. So you can, you know, switch it back and forth. And they're also very cheap. The one I have is metal. I think it was like 20 bucks and it's lasted me like, I don't know, 20 years. The other thing that's nice is I probably spelled gorilla wrong. Yep. Gorilla tripod is these. So this one's the name brand, Joby, Joby. It's basically a tripod with the bendable legs, which are nice. So with the bendable legs, you know, you can kind of attach it to the back of a chair, or you can attach it to a tree, or you can kind of attach it to anything by wrapping the legs around it. I've found that the name brand, the Joby, it's never kind of loosened up on me. Whereas I also have had kind of the cheaper ones, and I've noticed that sometimes they're a little loose. So especially if you're using an actual camera and not just a phone, I would worry about the stability of it not falling. And for me, it's, you know, a price difference of, you know, 50 bucks versus 20. And if you're carrying around, you know, a $3,000 camera, I would probably spend the $30 just for peace of mind. So in the chat, someone mentioned B&H. B&H is absolutely wonderful for buying all of these photography supplies. It's also really nice for any kind of technology things. They have really good sales as well, especially around like Black Friday, that sort of thing. And oftentimes they will have things in stock whenever Amazon doesn't. Their search functionality in my opinion, isn't as good. But you'll be able to find whatever you want on here. And oftentimes they will have more. I had a tripod. Being silly. But more often, whatever you find on here will be, a higher quality product, just because they don't have things like Amazon sellers do, where they just, repackage the same thing over and over and over. And it's, a slightly cheaper, but slightly lower cost alternative. It's also incredibly good for lenses. So you basically can take your camera, you can say what camera you have, and you can find lenses for it.
Cool.
And again, some of these are very expensive, $2,000. Some of these are cheap, $200. But you can find whatever lenses you want.
Wonderful. Well, you have given us a lot to explore. Much appreciated. Does anybody have any last minute questions for Tim? No. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'm going to stop the recording.